So today we are going to be talking about solving chord progression cliches. The big chord progression cliche that I want to talk about today is chord progressions that start and end on the same note. The reason I want to talk about this is I was on my way home yesterday and I heard a Billy Talent song on the radio called Surprise Surprise, which is entirely based around chord progression that begins and ends on the same note. It goes like this. So as you can see, it starts and ends on a D. The second note in the progression is a C, the flat seventh. The third note in the progression is an A, the fifth, and then back to the one. Now, they do something very good in order to resolve the worst part of the cliche, which is if we tried to make it, just straight chords. Sounds very cliched. So what they do is they use this off note, this F, which is the minor third, in order to make things a little bit more interesting. And they put that in between the chords. For the last bar, though, instead of going to that F, they use a riff to get back to that D. Okay, so now what we're going to talk about today is improving it, because it still sounds a little bit cliche. So what we can do in order to resolve that problem with the last note is kind of what they do, which is use a fill riff. The problem with theirs is that they play the last chord too long to prevent it from sounding too cliche. So what we want to do is we want to hit that last chord faster and then go into a riff. Now, as a source, we can kind of use our knowledge of blues guitar, which would be something like this. And it would sound something like... which we fill the last bar with more riff, as opposed to a lot of chord and a little bit of riff. We do a lot of riff and a little bit of chord. Unfortunately, this style of riff is blues based because we have that hard blues rock run back to our D. So because this song is more of an alternative rock song, we can't use a blues rock motif, so we need to find something else that's a bit more hard rock but alternative rock. So for that we'd go to the natural scale, which would be starting from that fifth, using minor scale, minor natural. So our riff might be something like this. And that uses a riff to get us out of the cliche. The other thing we can do is we can rely upon our knowledge of blues. And if you're familiar with blues, you'll know that in the 12-bar motif, it also, in the very most basic format of 12-bar, you start and end on the same note. So you start and end on the same note, the 1. And the last section, the last form of 12-bar is like the 5-4-1. And then you restart on the 1. However, in order to make things more interesting, most blues rock goes to the 5 on the last form in order to do a turnaround. In which case you go something like... and then back to the 1. So what we can do for this cliche, chord circle that we're working on is we can do the same thing. We can go to the 5 for a turnaround. And that comes from a blues motif. So if we were playing it in a blues rock format, it would sound more like this. Whoops. Or even, I'm going to just transpose everything to A because it's a bit easier. Something more like, let me see, if we're doing a more classic blues, it might be something like this. And for that, what I did was I went to the 5 on the turnaround, and I tried to make it a bit more dissonant because the dissonant helps to lead back to the 1. So I used the Jimi Hendrix chord, which is the 7 sharp 9. Now, similar, if we were trying to apply the same concept with the same chord progression to like a jazz progression, jazz, you can use a walking bass line so that it doesn't sound as cliched if you start and end on the 1, but it's the same situation where we'll always sound better if we use a 5 in the turnaround. And this is what that would sound like in D, which is the same key as the Billy Talent song. So that's our 1. So that's starting and ending on the 1 with no 5 in the turnaround. And then if we add the 5 in the turnaround, so that it sounds a lot less cliche, like it doesn't even sound cliche. And if you want to add some dissonance in a jazz context, you'd substitute your 7th chord and you'd add the 13th. Getting back to more of a hard rock motif, we can do the same thing with adding riffs as we did for the original chord progression, but instead of going to an alt rock motif using a natural minor scale, we might use the blues scale. So that would, in the key of A, which is the easiest to do, that would look something like this. If this is our standard motif for the 1 chord, or shortening it, and as you can see, we fill more of the bar with the riff. And similarly, in a blues rock, hard blues situation, we can go to the 5 for the turnaround in order to make it sound less cliche. And instead of using a chord, like a Jimi Hendrix chord, we can go to a riff based around the 5, such as the arpeggio from a song that was also on the radio last night, which is the Scorpions' No One Like You. And for that riff, use a 5 turnaround implied with the the E major arpeggio. And those are some of the ways that we can make this sound less cliche when you're involved in a circular chord progression, where a circular chord progression is one that starts and ends on the same note. Anyways, if you have any more questions, you can always send me an email, and I hope that this has been really helpful.